Are you ready to overcome the complexities and burdens that come with your success? Join the team at Centura Wealth Advisory in the Live Life Liberated podcast. Now, on to the show.
Well, good morning and welcome. Today I have as my guest Marilyn Daniels. Marilyn, thank you for agreeing to be on our...
My pleasure.
Marilyn and I have known each other and become friends and clients and like a second mom since 2004 is when we met after you attended a dinner event that our firm was sponsoring. I didn't meet you there, but I met you at our office shortly thereafter.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's amazing, 18 years later. And
Here we are.
yeah. So why don't you share us a little bit about your background with the listening audience?
Okay. Well, I'm a native San Diegan and product of San Diego City Schools. I went to San Diego State. I'm a graduate of San Diego State, and I have an education degree, and then I have a master's in education from what used to be called USI, University, San Diego University, United States International University. It has another name now. And I taught in San Diego City Schools for about 32 years, mainly kindergarten, until I retired. My family background is that I am an only child. My parents were very strong, devoted people, grew up during the Depression, believed in saving money and investing their money, and they started buying rental property when they were newly married. And then we built, my father was an architect. He designed an apartment building for us. We moved just a block or so down the street. We lived in the apartment building for 9 years while I was in high school, junior high school, college. And they managed the apartment, and we lived there, and that was the beginning of their investment. And it worked out very, very well for them. So, and I was married for 42 years until my husband passed away. I have 2 daughters that are also clients here, and of which I'm very proud.
Of course you are. They're both very, very accomplished girls. And so your father passed in the early 90s, right?
94.
And you then became trustee of their estate. Your mom was not in good health.
Correct.
Up until the time that we met, and you were kind of got thrust into this role as trustee and managing lots of affairs, and didn't really have, from a kindergarten teacher to trustee of lots of assets and real estate, was new to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So we met in 2004, and after reviewing the tax returns, we found out that the prior CPA had made a lot of errors, very large errors. One of the first things that we had to do was go to a mediation arbitration with that CPA, which you loved doing that. That was a lot of fun.
Derek's being very facetious. It was very difficult for me because while he didn't give us financial advice, he had prepared returns for several years. He had prepared returns for my parents, for my father, so I just continued. And to take him to arbitration was difficult. I'm a pretty calm person, but I had pretty close to a panic attack during that whole process. It was really hard. But Derek was right there, as was their current CPA, and as was Dave Gephardt, the attorney. The
estate planning attorney, yes.
Yeah.
And we had somebody on our staff who had worked at the IRS for 20 years, and so knew regs inside and out, and was very helpful. But yeah, when you start off the relationship and hundreds of thousands of dollars in recovery, which was helpful, and then getting all of that stuff set up in the appropriate way was pretty helpful, but painful as well.
Yeah, it was quite a process.
Yeah.
Quite a process.
And so your mom, the first thing we did is you really wanted help with us helping put together a wealth transfer plan for your mom to you. No one had they had done very minor things. And so spending time and really getting the analysis put together and put in place. And I still remember we had a meeting in the boardroom with one of your family members, who's a very, very sophisticated individual, to go through the entire plan, and he kind of gave the blessing, saying, "Yeah, I totally get why and how and what." And
That's right.
your mom didn't last much long. I think it was within a year of the planning. And
Yeah, it wasn't much longer. And then, of course, there was a 706 return filed. And usually those returns go off in a heavy envelope. This one went off in a box. I saw the box. And it was quite amazing because it came back no tax due.
Yeah.
And I remember I was so elated that my daughters and I had a dinner and invited your staff to dinner at a restaurant in La Jolla.
I remember that. Now was that after the 3-year time? So we set our clocks for 3 years.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, there was not an audit done there. And when that date came and went, you surprised us and, 10 or 12 people on our staff to a dinner that was very gracious. You and your daughters flew in for the evening.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how our relationship really got started, and then starting to plan for you and Walt and the girls. And that has been. Why don't you describe the experience of going through all that planning and all these acronyms and going through this whole process?
I have to say that my hand has been held by Derek and his staff because this was all new to me. And as I look back on this process, I learned a lot. And when my father died, I had become their trustee because my mother had Alzheimer's and was totally incapable. And I was also trustee for an uncle and also trustee for an aunt. And so I was, in it.
Thrust into all these.
And I was working full time. So it was challenging. But I look back at all that now and I think I'm grateful for all those experiences because they really taught me a lot and gave me a lot of self-confidence.
For sure. That
I handled it all. And so that was good.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your father was a real estate investor, was an architect, and he partnered with somebody that had different set of skills in the real estate business. He was the engineer math guy. His partner, as described by you, is really more of a sales person.
That's right.
Right.
They met actually. My father was an architect, but he was also, during World War II, he went to work for what used to be called Consolidated Vultee, and eventually became General Dynamics. So he designed airplanes, but he still would do what he called house plans from time to time for different family members. So he partnered with another gentleman, and they were a good team because my dad knew the building aspect, and his partner knew the real estate aspect. Oh, well, my dad did too, but they worked well together.
Yeah.
So
you described him as kind of the odd couple that worked.
Very definitely. He was a big man, Italian, lots of jewelry, kind of grubby looking, and my father was small, petite, and very well defined, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I do remember at my father's funeral service, this gentleman got up to speak, and he couldn't get through it. He just broke down and sat down.
Had a lot of love for your father. Yeah.
So they were a good team.
So your father passed in 94. This gentleman passed sometime thereafter.
2001.
Yeah, 2001. And a common problem that we see is when Generation 1, their partnership, when they pass, it gets passed down to Generation 2. And Generation 2 may not have the same bond, may have different goals, have competing interests. We see it a lot that Generation 2 doesn't treat each other as well. And that was true for your case as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was caught in the middle. And I remember being asked to testify in a court case. And I worked with the attorney, and I was not happy when my testimony was thrown out because all I could think of was the old Dragnet series, just the facts, ma'am. So that's all I did. And the judge threw out my testimony because he said it was scripted by the attorney. And I was not happy about that. But that's beside the point. It doesn't have anything to do with our experiences. So then with your nudging, I managed to divest myself from those properties. And
It took more than nudging. It was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. And
they didn't want to treat you fairly to exit, right? They
right.
wanted to assign big discounts, and
That's right.
we had to hire lawyers and put tactical pressure and strategic pressure in ways that finally caused others to decide that it would be better to separate rather than continue. But that was multi-year process, right?
It took a long time.
Yeah.
It was difficult because I had a good relationship with one of the family members and still do today.
Yeah. And so I think that's pretty typical. I think that I've got several clients in the same situation where they don't want to disrespect Generation 1's relationships and what went on. I think finally with the deferred maintenance and all the decisions, you're like, look, I need to make better decisions for my life and separate from what had happened. So getting that money, 1031, we did a reverse 1031 exchange and got those into properties where it worked better for you from a cash flow, from a total return, and relieved the maintenance and operational burden from you as you were getting older.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So in going through all of that, what would you share with the listening audience if they're in that same situation? You had a lot of concerns, a lot of fears. It took a lot of time. What was your learning?
I think that what I would say, what just worked for me, and I might have alluded to it before, is to go with your gut feeling about how you feel. And you have to have a lot of trust in the people that you're working with. And we had worked well enough together that I had that trust. And over the years we've been working, quite frankly, some of those investments weren't quite as good as maybe could have been. But overall, they've been excellent.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have trust in your advisors. And go with what your heart tells you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Not every investment works out perfectly. Timing, I think what you were alluding to was a transaction in 2007, right before the crash, and that was a rough transaction. But on the balance,
It's been very good.
Yeah. And so, how did you develop the trust? Like, what were the things that caused you to say, "Gosh, I really do have peace of mind or trust that this group is"?
Good question. I think personalities. I tend to have a good read on people. I know lots of people. I was a classroom teacher for a long time, and I just had a feeling that you were interested in had my best interest at heart.
Yeah. So it takes time to.
And it takes time to develop that. And I know that you actually one time referred me to someone, wanted me to talk to someone, one of your other clients who was a little hesitant about investments. And she wanted to know why. I can't remember the exact conversation, but I just told her that I trusted you.
Yeah. I remember who that was that we referred. And thank
I
you
think
for
she's
doing
still
that.
a client.
She is.
Yeah.
She is. So, what do you think has been the most valuable learning experience along the way?
That's hard to say. I think the fact that my assets have increased, we haven't really talked about charitable activities.
Okay.
So I've had the opportunity to get involved with various charities through donations, but also through actual hands-on experiences.
Some leadership positions. You've joined
I have several right now.
Yeah.
Leadership positions with different charities that I've become a part of. You introduced me to the Tarek Kamisa Foundation many years ago. And I'll be honest, the only reason you you had a get together at your house, and the only reason I went is because I wanted to see what your house looked like. But it was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it, and that was my introduction, and now I serve on the board of TKF.
Yeah.
And so that was very, very rewarding. And then I have other organizations that I'm a part of. I'm a member of a branch of AAUW, Eliminates Alcohol. I'm president of the foundation, and we raise money for scholarships for women in San Diego schools, San Diego universities. So that's been rewarding. And then another one is in Point Loma, and I'm on that board also, and we raise money to keep the building that we own steady, but also raise money for different charitable groups in Point Loma.
Yeah.
And that's been rewarding. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the assets that I've accrued.
Yeah. So as your investments have done very, very well, significantly well, and has caused you to go, gosh, I can't spend all this money and cannot spend the money on my kids. You've started to have these other interests on the causes that are near and dear to your heart. I think it brings a lot of value to your life and seeing you invest in these organizations.
So it's been good.
Yeah.
It's been good.
So some of this stuff causes people to say, gosh, it's so complex, it's complicated. How have you dealt with the complexity?
Well, by letting some of it go. And that's been very true. I did what I could to keep a handle on everything. I value the coordination that you have between the different entities, your expertise, CPA, legal advice, and that's been invaluable to have that all basically under one roof, which is how your firm started.
Right. That's not the way we're structured today, but the coordination still exists.
The coordination exists, right.
Yeah. So I think other clients have shared that by taking the laboring oar of coordination from the client, so having us lead the communication effort between the CPA firm and the estate planning firm and the valuation firm, that it allows clients to take on more complexity because we are owning that coordination piece of it.
That's true, and I very much appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so what's been the worst investment you've ever made? What's
the building that I bought that we've already alluded to.
In 2007.
I refinanced a free and clear building.
Yep.
Took all the cash flow out of it into that building and realized once I got in it that it needed some reconstruction that I didn't have the money for.
Some deferred maintenance. Yeah.
So that was difficult.
That was rough. You ended up selling that building, and what was it, flat? Did you make money? Did you lose money on that investment?
I think it was about even, as I recall. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the clap then was donated to charity over a period of time until it was gone. So that was a good thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all bad.
Yeah. What's been your best investment?
Oh, my best investment was when I sold the building that I had totally refinanced and did a 1031 into another building with up in
with a sponsor up in Northern California.
In Northern California.
Yeah.
And that's been the very best investment. And now, of course, it's going to be sold eventually. It's done so well that it makes too much money. It's too big of a portion of my assets.
It is.
So
That's being sold here in 2 weeks.
Oh, in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Good. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that has worked out very, very well.
That was the best investment.
Yeah. So your girls started to get involved. They started to become more and more successful, and they needed some of these strategies. And they've also, they've got very busy lives with their professional lives. As your estate has continued to grow, you've brought them into the mix of having them help participate in managing the estate. Describe that and how that has gone.
Well, as I've said before, I'm very proud of my children. They're very successful. I realize that with some people, that friends that I have would never do what I've done because they wouldn't trust their children to perform adequately. But that was not the case with me. And so was it easy to turn over some assets to them?
A lot of assets?
No, it was not easy. It's still not easy because for tax purposes, I no longer have control of some of those assets. I hear about them from time to time, but that's difficult.
Yeah.
And in preparation for this meeting, I went over the Trust B assets that I have, but I realized that there was quite a bit that I didn't know about. And so, anyway.
Yeah. So, and as we spoke about this maybe 10 years ago, I said, as we were talking about, look, as these things go over time, and I remember that we would be eventually, hey, we should get some of these things transferred outside of your taxable estate. And I still remember today, Derek, I haven't always been wealthy. I'm finally wealthy, and you want me to give it away to my children. I am not ready to do this. We're just laying the groundwork for what's to come in 10 years or so.
Well, I did not grow. I mean, my parents were successful, obviously, from what I've said. But, gosh, when I first got married, our food budget literally was $16 a week. That seems preposterous now, but we had steak once a week between the two of us. So that's where I come from. And even now that I'm very grateful for what I have, it's still difficult. And my children, I do travel a lot, or I did before pandemic. I'm starting to do that again, if the airlines ever ease up. And my children said, Mom, you are flying first class, right? Well, no. Mom, you are flying first class. So it's been difficult for me to accept what I have.
Right.
I still feel like the same person inside that has to pinch pennies.
Yeah. Yeah, that value system is hard to break, right?
And I think it's probably good, to have that value system.
Yeah. I remember when you were buying a house in a very exclusive part of San Diego County, and the thought of the mortgage, I couldn't imagine paying that much for a mortgage. No worries, we'll take it out of this account. You'll never see it. Just like, okay. I think today would be a speed bump today, right?
Yeah, that house has over doubled in value.
Yeah.
In 10 years, exactly 10 years.
Yeah. Well, do you ever think about what your dad would say? My daughter, my only daughter, took what I started back in the 40s. And what do you think he would say about how you have?
I think he would be astonished, and he would be proud. And I know he'd be proud of his granddaughters, for sure.
Yeah.
And he was able to see his oldest granddaughter graduate from college, and he was very ill. And that was a big deal for him to get up to graduation.
Yeah.
So I think he'd be very proud.
Yeah. I think he'd be very proud of you.
Thank you.
You had a teacher's background to then deal with all these professionals, lots and lots of decisions. I mean, you were making lots and lots of decisions,
Yeah.
And you were forced to, right? There was nobody else.
And as I said before, when I was all of a sudden I'm trustee for everybody under the sun, I learned a lot. I had to. And because I tend to be organized and get up early for the most part, that's what I did. I had everything, and that was, I'm dating myself, but we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have, I remember saying to my father when he was very ill, I said, everything's going to be on computer someday. And he didn't even have a computer with his engineering background or a cell phone. 30 years makes a big difference in our lives.
Yes, it does. Well, it's very gratifying for me in the work that I do, seeing us plan for your parents' estate, getting those assets to you, not without mistake, but doing a pretty darn good job of my assessment, both
Absolutely.
on the planning side and the investment side, doing a good job of getting them planned to your children. And it's just very gratifying to see clients set and achieve their goals and then have such abundance that they're trying to figure out how to make the world a better place. And I see that you doing that. I see both of your children doing that. That's just very gratifying work to help clients set and achieve their goals. What final thought do you have to our listening audience about anything, about your experience, about learnings?
Well, I actually wrote down something, so I'll just read it. I have confidence in your staff that they have my best interest at heart. And I'm grateful for your expertise and advice. I would not have my current level of financial independence without you. And I'm very, very grateful. I went to, from my home, I could see fireworks on the bay. And I was at a neighbor's house. And we were watching the fireworks. And this gentleman said to me, "How lucky you are to live here." And I said, "I'm grateful every day." So, and I am. And I thank you. I'm grateful to your expertise.
Oh, it's been
a great friend.
Yeah, you've been a great friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Being your friend and serving you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Live Life Liberated podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Centura Wealth Advisory. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Centura Wealth Advisory. Centura is an SEC registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in San Diego, California. Centura and its representatives are in compliance with the current registration and notice filing requirements imposed on SEC registered investment advisors, in which Centura maintains clients. Centura may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Tax relief varies based on client circumstances, and all clients do not achieve the same results.